call to order the Williamsport City Council meeting of Thursday, May 24th, 2018, roughly 7:30 p.m. Please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the flag salute. Our Heavenly Father, we look to you tonight, Lord, and we give you thanks today. In the midst of trying times nationally, across our state, and sometimes in our city, we want to remain thankful for the many good things we have here in our city, the benefits that we experience and that we hold in our hand and see every day, the natural beauty around us, the community that we have, the incredible potential we have for the future. We're grateful for all of that, dear Lord, and we thank you and ask for your guidance, and we ask for your wisdom as we navigate complex issues and financial and otherwise, that you'll help lead us through that we can each make the best decision for our city, for our constituents, for our citizens, and for the people of the region. And we ask it in Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, approval of the City Council minutes for May 10th, 2018. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Comments, questions, corrections from council members? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Limited courtesy of the floor. We have no requests tonight, correct? And I need to announce, of course, it's obvious, Dr. Williamson isn't present tonight. We'll move to item 5, appointments and reappointments, Planning Commission. And Mr. Narr, you're going to handle this one for us?
Good evening, Mr. Allison and members of council. What we're doing is requesting an appointment for Matthew Vanaski of 845 Grampian Boulevard. The appointment is for 2 years, will commence on the 24th and end 2/17/20. I believe each one of you have a copy of his bio. He has a master's of civil engineer from Villanova. He has MPDS qualifications. He has MS4 planning. So he has a lot to bring to the Planning Commission, and I recommend him for an appointment. I think he'll be a good fit for our Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Narr. Is there a motion?
Second.
Second. Comment?
I just wanted to mention that this did come to the public safety. We got a chance to meet Mr. Vaneski, and obviously he is very qualified, and we're excited to have him, a city resident and a young man ready to get involved, and so we're very excited about him being an important part, I think, of our Planning Commission. So we didn't take a vote, but we asked some questions, and he won't have any problems making the meetings, and so we're very excited about him.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Katz?
When you read this bio, I think we all want to go kidnap this man and bring him into City Hall to work. I mean, this is what we're looking for a city engineer. I mean, he has all the qualifications. I mean, I'm happy he's going to be on the Planning Commission, but boy, he's going to be such an asset to the city. So I'm sorry we didn't get to meet him, but looking forward to it.
Yeah. Other comments or questions? Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. I'm going to drop down we'll go to item 14 first, and we'll do, item 15. And we'll do 15, 16, 17, and 18. Mr. Girardi?
Yes, I guess. Good evening, Vice President Allison and members of council. We're going with the demo, correct, first? Okay. What you had before is a request for a demo at the property at 343 West 4th Street, located in Central Business District. This was tabled at the last meeting, and at this point, I don't have any other comments.
Okay. Is there a motion and a second to take it off the table?
Second.
Okay. We're off the table. We can discuss. Council? Ms. Mia?
I have several points to make, and I actually need to begin with an apology to all members of council, to Mr. Girardi, and indeed to Mr. Logue, because I got a little caught up in some goings-on at the Water Authority for the last week or so, and I had not had as much time to research this until today as I'd intended, so I did not communicate with anyone before tonight's meeting, and it would usually be my preference to reach out to everyone involved before coming to a meeting, but I simply didn't have time. I'm very sorry. I am here before you today to request that council take a step that we very rarely take with our demolition ordinance and deny the demolition permit tonight. I doubt that anyone else has reached out to either of our solicitors relating to this particular structure, because I, generally speaking, have been the one most passionate about this. But if you had, you would have quickly discovered that both of our solicitors represent Mr. Klingerman, and consequently, neither of our solicitors could offer any legal advice for a path forward on the fact that in our original agreement with Mr. Klingerman, he had promised to make, I believe it was good faith, best efforts to maintain the structure at the corner of 4th Street and Elmira. And not only has that clearly not happened for the last little bit, it seems to have never been his intent. He also, as part of the renderings that we received and that we submitted for grant funding for a project that included the arena, the building was shown as a standing structure, and consequently, if that building does come down, there is the potential for us to actually be, that is to say, we're no longer meeting agreements that we have made with the state for the redevelopment and capital assistance funding grant that we submitted. All of that said, I guess I best go back to the beginning, because I know at least that Mr. Slaughter has not been with us since the arena was constructed in 2014, or since we executed the developers agreement in 2014. So the building, obviously, on the corner of 4th Street and Elmira initially was our very first, well, not our very first, but was the YMCA building here in the city of Williamsport. Over the years, the YMCA added new services, new facilities. It occupied a good chunk of that block. When Mr. Klingerman acquired it from the Y, the stated intent was to build an arena behind it and retain that structure as either office space or apartments. Frankly, I actually have it right here, but I can't recall. And the demolition on the parcel moved forward. That the building was, that is to say, had been occupied until it was acquired by Mr. Klingerman. And it was included in every step of the design process. We saw, I think the members of council who were here during that can vouch for the fact that we saw umpteen renderings of the building, some of which apparently had even been created by Mayor Campana and not, in fact, by the developer himself. And all of them included this building standing, even though many of them didn't look like what we see today. And the building was included in indeed the final drawings that we submitted for the grant funding. The building, because several members of council and the administration, so they said, were were interested in seeing the building maintained, the building actually was a codicil in the developer's agreement. Page 12, I believe, in the developer's agreement. I can't recall exactly which specific section, that asserted that the developer would use good faith best efforts to retain the structure and to reuse it. And to the best of my knowledge, we've performed very little oversight. I'll let Mr. Girardi address that as to whether or not there were any best efforts being used, but I would say that there's been kind of clearly a drainage alleyway heading into the basement of the building for years now. And my understanding is that the utilities were all severed when the remaining buildings were demolished 4 years ago, which would make it seem as though good faith was perhaps never a part of the equation. I have here, thanks to a private citizen, a stack of newspaper articles quoting the developer as saying that Dan Klingerman, CEO and president of the Liberty Group, has said he also wants to convert the existing YMCA building into high-end apartments and a conference center. Literally 4 or 5 years of quotes in the paper from either members of the administration or Dan Klingerman talking about how we intended to preserve that structure. Despite the fact that the building has actually not been taken care of for the last 4 years in any particular way, structurally it's still in pretty good shape. Cosmetically, it's a hot mess. That's in part because even as I walked over here tonight, I could have climbed into the rear facade if I'd wanted to, because it has remained open to both the elements and passerby throughout the entirety of its time there. I want to remind everyone that as part of the arena project, and I'm not saying this because I think that this isn't the way the funding should have gone, I'm saying it merely as part of the record, Mr. Klingerman received a $1.5 million direct subsidy from the city, a $500,000 direct grant from the Visitors Bureau, and a $500,000 direct grant from the Parking Authority. Additionally, he received $1.5 million in infrastructure and utility work on the site, for a total of $4 million in subsidies toward that arena project. There were a handful of conditions attached to that. One of them, of course, was that he construct and operate the arena. One of them was the mayor's town green. And the final one was that he reuse the building on the corner of 4th and Elmira. He did a portion of the town green. The building is more or less as we believed it would be, and we've had no good faith efforts on the corner of 4th and Elmira. When this demolition came to the table, as I said, I reached out to several people, first and foremost our solicitors. And all of this actually began several years ago when Mr. Klingerman actually had talked about demolishing it. I started doing some outreach there. I thought I'd resolve the situation, and then it came back up. As I said, our own solicitors are all conflicted, but I've spoken to a handful of other attorneys and the State Historic Preservation Officer. My understanding is that while our demolition ordinance as constructed doesn't necessarily give us any legal standing for preventing demolition, when backed up by the historical documents that we have in our favor at this time, we should have every legal reason to deny a demolition based on promises received from the original building owner. Now, you'll note, of course, and that I speak only of Mr. Klingerman, and that's for very good reason. It's Mr. Klingerman who I feel has not held up his end of an agreement that we had with him over the past 5 years. Mr. Logue, of course, has absolutely no relationship to any of that. He simply has acquired a structure. But that said, the covenants that Mr. Klingerman agreed to do travel with the land. And that means that for better or for worse, we are in a situation where I would recommend that we deny a demolition to Mr. Logue and leave him with his recourse to Mr. Klingerman. I have at the same time been looking out. I know that there had been talk of an RFP through the Chamber of Commerce for a developer for the structure. Mr. Girardi, I never did receive any information from you after the last council meeting.
I did receive information from Jason Fink. There was 3 developers that were involved. One was Matt Showers, one was Mr. Hutchinson, and the third one, I can't remember who it was. It went out. None of them, as Mr. Logue and as Mr. Klingerman all said, it is monetarily not feasible.
Prohibitive, yes.
To fix the building.
Right.
It did go out for an RFP. I had it. Jason did text me. I'm sorry I didn't get that information out to you, but it did go through that. There was 3 developers. I cannot remember who the third one was, but there was 3 developers that were interested in it.
I can assume then that it never made it past the local pool. of developers?
No.
Okay. Because our understanding had been when we were initially talking about the RFP that it was going to go out not just to the local pool, but to people within the state who had a greater level of expertise in dealing with these particular structures. The structure is really interesting. It actually has an identical twin in York, Pennsylvania, and a number, obviously, of similarly constructed Beaux-Arts Y buildings across the state. So if we do lose the structure, we lose a historical element, not just for the city of Williamsport. We lose, also a screen from an eyesore, but we lose a bit of state history as well, and the history of the YMCA. And I am almost done here. The one thing I did also learn from the State Historic Preservation Office, in addition to the fact that the codicil that I spoke of in the developer's agreement should allow us to deny the demolition, is that the building is eligible for not only state but also federal tax credits related to its status as it is listed on the National Historic Register. It is not a part of our stated historic district, but it is listed as a supporting structure in our historic district in the city, both at the state level and in the city, but is on the National Historic Register as part of Williamsport's historic district, which makes it eligible, as I said, for both federally and state-wise. All right. So I guess what I would say is that the I am simply looking. I would suggest that we deny the demolition for this evening and work toward a path for reuse of the structure or some sort of workable solution with either the existing owner or Mr. Klingerman. It would also be my suggestion. I've been reading in the paper all week long about how desperate the mayor is for funding here in the city, and we gave Dan Klingerman $1.5 million. As part of an agreement, and he did not hold up to his end of the agreement. And it would be my suggestion, I don't know that it's something that council could pursue, but if the mayor is looking for funds, perhaps he should look toward the agreements that we've executed and not entirely, and folks have not entirely been faithful to, instead of, looking to other assets that the city has that are functioning and working order. Anyway, that's all that I have to say about it. I'm happy to share the quotes from the paper and anything else if anyone needs any information. Okay?
Mr. Noviello.
Just a couple quick points, and one very quickly for our legal representative. Do we have to take this off the table before it goes any further than this?
We did.
I think that you already did that.
Okay, all right. First off, I agree 100% with what Ms. Mealy had to say here. It's hard to argue the facts as they stand. My problem that I have with denying the demolition as we stand here tonight is that we have done that in the past, and it has cost us litigation issues. Most, if not all of which, have not come out in our favor. If I'm wrong about that, somebody can please correct me. So historically, we have a tough situation to overcome regarding the denial itself. With respect to our legal representation, again, can we vet out these potential legal reasons for denying the demolition before we take it off the table? I mean, before it comes to a vote here, rather?
I'm not sure,
Well,
Councilman, what do you
it was
mean by
mentioned that
that?
there may be some legal reasons why we might be able to go ahead and deny the demolition
That's an excellent
regarding the issues that have been mentioned already. Do we have to, can we look into that before we make a decision?
My suggestion would be that council review whatever evidence it has tonight before it makes a decision on the record before that's actually done. So if you're going to rely on anything, you should put it into the record.
So would that require us to then to put this back on the table again, so we can go through that? then?
You have it on the table, no, you have it, it's not on the table now.
He means to table
I
it
understand.
again.
The table,
Right.
yes.
But the way the ordinance is, if you put it on the table again without the agreement of the applicant and don't act on it tonight, then I think it's going to be deemed denied under the ordinance.
Thank you.
So excuse me, I just want
And again, just so everybody knows, I did research a little bit, and I did step out. I realized the attorneys are associated with Mr. Klingerman and Mr. Logue. I did go back to our attorney zone. I did send out the email, and from Mr. Smith's recollection of what's in the agreements, there's nothing he sees that is binding. Also, number one, it's not a contract we had with Mr. Klingerman. We had a MOU, which is completely different, Memorandum of understanding is completely different than a contract. You have to honor your contract.
We had an MOU, and then we had a
MOU,
develop- and
but
then
if
we-
I'm
and then we
correct-
had a developer's agreement
But if I'm
following the
correct,
MOU.
did you have a developer's agreement?
Yes, that would be a binding contract, Joe.
I would ask the attorney if it was. And even if it was, from our representation that we have, from the information I got from Mr. Smith, he hasn't found anything that's legally wrong with what Mr. Klingerman's doing.
I guess my point is Mr. Smith can't legally advise us because he represents Mr. Klingerman, neither can Mr. White. I have sought the legal advice of attorneys who do not represent Mr. Klingerman and have been informed by both of them, all three of them.
My
Excuse me.
question then would be to counsel is, when you're asking for legal advice, is that representing all of counsel or just you?
Well, that's, I mean, I'm asking for legal advice in the same way that we'd be asking for a legal opinion.
Correct,
The
and you
only trial of that, of course,
But
is
what I'm
the
saying is
court.
I got a legal opinion from an attorney, and you're getting a legal opinion attorney, and it's different. I guarantee if we go to a couple different attorneys, they're all going to be different opinions.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is, in this
I know what you're
particular
saying.
case, your legal opinion is conflicted and consequently really doesn't count.
I'm just letting you know what I've found out from our attorneys.
Right. But I mean, I understand that. I don't know, and I see, and I think that our solicitor can offer us, that our solicitor present can offer us advice on whether or not we could, we would be wise to seek the permission of the developer and do further looking into this over the next few weeks, which I would be fine with. You know, it's not a deemed denial unless we don't have permission from the applicant.
That's correct. If
Right.
the applicant gives permission for it to remain under consideration by the council, the demolition ordinance allows meetings, as in plural. It doesn't cap that, but realistically, if it continues to stay on the table, it's going to be deemed denial unless you have the developer's approval.
Got it. Yeah, I'm not asking anybody by any stretch of the imagination to trust me on this one because everybody can do their own legal research, but I would say that I've reached out to a handful of different attorneys and that was all of their opinion on the legal matter. But the other thing that I feel, and the several members of council I've spoken to feel, is that nobody wants to turn it into a legal matter. Right. It's not about that.
Correct.
We don't want the building to come down. So anything that we could do to avoid it being a legal matter and not get the building down is ideal. It simply was not brought to my attention again until just before the demolition permit arrived in our council packets that in fact that was the next foreseen step. And consequently, there hasn't really been time to seek another avenue, to seek another developer, to look at a little bit outside the scope of what we currently have. And I understand that all of us want to get that eyesore taken care of, and believe me, nobody more than me who's been asking about it for the last 4 years. That said, I don't want to get that eyesore taken care of by turning it into a flat paved parking lot in front of the back of a metal shed. So I'm asking for a little more time, I guess. And sorry.
Mrs. Katz.
I do have a question. With all, this is for finance. If any of the money that was given to Mr. Klingerman for this project, were any grants attached to any of this? I have not, with everything that's been on our plate the last 2 weeks, none of us have had the full time to try and research all of this.
Well, you know, again, as I remember the MOU or the developer's agreement, what have you, is there was a change in the language. Originally, it was more stringent in terms of not demolishing the building, but we ended up with language that said that the developer would do his best effort to try to, you know, revitalize or renovate the building for whatever purpose that was intended. But I don't think there was any thing attached to any of the grants that we gave the developer related to that particular building at the end of the day.
Because there was so much money going in so many different directions that it was at times hard to keep track of. And there was some funding that came through.
No, it started out as a RACB grant.
Right.
That was received for Destination 2014, specific to the arena project. And then we were able to negotiate a swap, so to speak, for funding, where that $3 million then was invested in other parts of the downtown revitalization project, in particular Trade and Transit 2 project. And in return, the city agreed to provide funding for his project, the arena, and the amounts that were stated, that included direct money to the developer, as well as an agreement to renovate Lot E and the infrastructure related to the project. So, but I remember vividly that there was a lot of debate about that, and at the end of the day, everybody agreed to put the language in there that said the developer would use his best effort.
But I think the meat of Bonnie's question, and Bill, might have been that part of what we received a redevelopment and capital assistance program grant for was the Destination 2014 project. That is to say, the Destination 2014 project in its entirety was included in the description that was sent to the state that received the grant money, even if the grant money was not expended on that.
Yeah, yes, you're exactly right, because I was part of the team that went down to the governor's office to present the project, and clearly that building was part of the presentation, and many jobs that were referenced
Right.
to be created by, and I think at one time it was Innovation Center, and it was called a lot of different things, but
Right.
it was centered to our presentation at one point in time.
Yeah.
But not, I think, not directly as part of an agreement, but it was part of the overall project
Right.
at one point in time.
Thank you.
We do have the applicant here tonight. Mr. Logue, would you care to join Mr. Girardi to?
I don't mind answering any questions if you'd like, but other than that, I don't have anything to say.
I guess specifically addressed to the point that the solicitor brought up, that if it was tabled, it would be considered, if it was retabled, it would be considered a denial unless you agreed to let it be retabled for another period of time.
I have an opportunity with the demolition contractor to repurpose a lot of material at this time. We have a 30-day notification requirement to DEP, and then it will take a couple more weeks to get a contractor in here. If you can come up with something in that 30-day notification period with DEP, you know, I would be willing to entertain any other potential offers. I don't disagree with Ms. Mealy at all on any of the comments, but I have to move on, and I could lose, I have an opportunity to a good opportunity to get it demolished at a reasonable price because of the repurposing of the material at this time. So I can't afford to extend this for another 2 weeks, but I can tell you that if something comes up during a 30-day DEP review period, I certainly would entertain it, and I could stop the contract at any time.
Okay. To be clear, you couldn't afford to have it tabled for another
Not
time?
right now. I have to get my application in, and I have to get
Okay.
a contractor on board, and I have an obligation on another project with the material, and I have to be able to do that, knowing that this is going to occur.
Okay, but in lieu of that, then you would entertain any reasonable offers?
At any time up till that 30 days from now, yes. I mean, if someone was to come forward and have another use for the property, I would certainly prefer to do that, as long as it was a viable option.
Mr. Logue, I think you'd stated to me in private, and I'm not asking you to make promises here that you don't intend to make, but you'd stated to me in private that you would give the building to another developer if they wanted to develop it. Okay. No, frankly, I'm still going to vote to deny the demolition.
I would be happy to have closing review probably as early as Monday.
Okay. So, and you would be willing to, if we were able to, say, arrange something through the city's redevelopment authority or something like that to take the structure? Okay. Understood. I will yield to more discussion by council, actually, if you don't mind.
Council, anybody else?
I'm
Here to
just
weigh in?
wondering, where does that leave us right here at this particular
Well,
point in time?
what's going to happen is you have two choices. You can deny it, and then Mr. Logue would have to go through the court system to appeal the decision, which most likely he would win his case. Or you can approve the demolition contingent upon 30 days, maybe Mr. Logue working with you. That's your two choices, because you already put it out on the table.
Or we could, if we
Right.
table it, it's a default.
Well, if you table it,
It's a
then it's
deemed
not.
denial, right. From my perspective, Logan, Mr. Logue, and this is no commentary whatsoever on you or the ways in which you conduct business, and I appreciate you very much entering into the record, but the city did have a deal with a developer who did not live up to the promises that we were made, and I'm very sorry, but despite all those promises, I will still vote to deny the demolition, because I simply, in my years on city council, it has made me very sad to see the city occasionally get taken advantage of, and I don't want to have to tell the many people from the historic district who've communicated with me over the last couple of weeks that I voted yes on something because I had an arrangement, and then the arrangement falls through. And I used to be a woman who was a handshake sort of woman, and my experience on city government sometimes makes me otherwise. But thank you.
There's one thing I'd like to add, if I can, before. I know there was, Mr. Klingerman is here, and I know that the building sat there for several years. But again, I must make sure everybody understands, it sat there for 2 years because of an issue with the contractor demolishing the building in a legal battle, which nothing could be done to the building. Would I want to heat and keep a 50,000 square foot building for 2 winters heated with the cost? I wouldn't if I was the owner of the building. I don't know if he would, but that's probably the reason why you have your pipes that are broken and so forth, because the cost of heating that building for 2 years while he's going through litigation isn't something that I would recoup as a person, as far as financially. So again, you did mention that, but there was a reason why it sat for a period of time, and it was because of the legal demolition
I
process.
said that the utilities were severed at the time of demolition, Joe.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Severed.
No, I
As in
understand that.
not capable of being reattached.
Well, no, they could have been. They could have been, very easily.
Okay.
You know, but I don't know if the cost of that, doing it, heating that building for 2 years would be worth it for Mr. Klingerman for nobody being in the building. I just explaining to you, though,
Right.
because of the demolition and the legal problem that Mr. Klingerman was having with his contractor, it did sit vacant, nothing could be done during that time frame.
I always had a bit of a difficult time with that logic. But I believe strongly. I am in the process of reaching out to pretty much everybody through every channel I can use to try and make certain that we've exhausted all options for a developer. And I've already received some potentially interested communications, which is exciting. But it frankly takes more than 2 weeks to get somebody to agree to take on a project like this, and it might take more than 30 days. I believe in the advice from the solicitors that I've spoken to that says that there may well be a case here, and I consequently cannot approve the demolition. And I apologize once again to Mr. Logue for his having gotten caught up in this arrangement. It was never my intention, but I thought that we had, that I was being kept in the loop on some things that I wasn't, so I got a little blindsided here.
Mr. Henderson?
We could approve a demolition and put a condition on that demolition, is that correct? And could we put a condition on that the demolition is, any action is delayed for 30 days? Is that what you were implying? Though we could, if we were to approve that demolition, condition it that no action be taken for 30 days, giving Ms. Mealy at least that 30 days.
I have a 30-day notification requirement for DEP that I'm obligated before I can do anything. I have a 30-day notification.
Okay. So that would be fine if we were to do that. It's difficult to continue tying it up. It's really hard to do that. I'd love to save the building as much as anybody, but I don't want a legal battle either, and I'm not sure we're prepared for that. So that would be my recommendation, that we would put that condition on it and approve that demolition in order to prevent any legal battle. That's my take on that.
Mr. White, can we do that?
The time frame that you're looking to put on for a condition?
30 days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty certain that if you're gonna approve it with a condition like a time limitation, I mean, that's gonna be an appropriate action.
So would we have to make an amendment to the approval?
You would make, whoever's gonna make the motion to add a condition to it should make that motion second, and then you should
Okay.
vote on that.
Would that have to be approved by Mr. Logue also, though?
Well, there's actually, there's a provision in the demolition ordinance that if there are conditions attached, there's a process for him to
Okay.
object to
Just
those
wanted to make
types of
sure. Yep.
conditions, that's correct. But it doesn't have to happen now, it's a 5 business day window after.
Got you.
Mr. Novio?
I just don't want to put Mr. Logan between a rock and a hard place. I'm guessing he's pretty much there right now. If this 30 days doesn't interfere with his future plans or anything that will cause him more hassles or problems, then I would vote for the demolition with this condition attached to it as well. I'm really loath to go against something that this body itself has put in place legally. And we've already seen, as I mentioned a few times, that you know, we don't come out good in these kind of litigations. That alone is the reason why I would vote for the demolition. But if we can give Mr. Logue some breathing room, I'm certainly happy to do that and provide any time for further serving the idea of a more satisfying outcome for everybody.
Anybody else? Ms. Mila?
With all due respect, Mr. Logue will then have notified DEP that he's taking the structure down and will have submitted and entered into a contract with the demolition company. Those steps obviously would make it perhaps difficult for him to back out moving forward. So perhaps, Mr. Henderson, if you're asking for conditions, the condition should be dual. A 30-day timeframe until demolition starts, and within that 30 days, that any reasonable proposal for reuse of the structure be entertained up to the 30-day mark.
Yeah, I think that was what I was thinking, and I would agree with that additional condition.
Or are you making that motion?
So I will make that motion that there will be a 30-day, I guess, that no action be taken for 30 days, and that in that 30-day time, if there is a viable option, that it would be entertained.
There's a motion and a second to amend. Pardon me? Yeah. I'm just saying, it's been moved and seconded. We need to, Mr. Jordan?
Just as the code administrator, I do have a question. Mr. Loger, Ms. Mealy decides to find a developer who can do this for no cost. He just gets the building.
Right.
Okay? My question is, should we not make sure the person who gets the building has the capital to renovate this building? Because if not, I'm going to have a nightmare for the next 20 years. So that's
Understood,
my
Mr. Girardi,
question. It's
but-
easy to give the building to somebody, but we should make sure the person who gets it has the money to invest in it, to renovate it.
Understood. It would seem to me that the time for thinking of things like that would have been before the demolition permit came through the door, Mr. Girardi.
And they did do that, and they went through, and no one wanted the building for $1.
They advertised within the city.
You got 5 developers, 5 all have money to renovate it, none of them said it's feasible to do. So I'm
Mr.
just saying,
Girardi,
I think we should
I'm
have.
merely saying that I am trying to solve a problem that could have been solved in other ways. And I tried to solve it beforehand and did not meet with much, with a lot of collaboration. And I would like an additional 30 days to solve it. And given that additional 30 days, I'm going to make my best, good faith, best efforts, Mr. Girardi, to locate a developer with the capital.
And I believe you will, Mr. Miller. I don't disagree with that. I just want to make sure the individual who gets the building has the capital to renovate it. That's what my concern is. I think that's everybody's concern.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any other discussion on the amendment?
The owner,
Oh,
I guess
Mr.
I want to clarify this, that you have 30 days to find somebody to take over the building, but it doesn't stop me from my DEP notification process, which is part of the demolition process. Is 30 day
Right.
notification.
yes,
I mean, it's something I have to agree to, I want to make sure
Right.
that what I am agreeing to.
yes.
So it's not a 60-day process.
Right.
It's 3 days from the time it starts.
5 days after today,
Right.
35.
Probably Tuesday now, that's when my 30 days, DEP starts, and if after 30 days, you have no viable proposal,
Okay, should we make that part of the, make the DEP application?
Councilman Henderson can clarify his motion.
I think that was clarified, was it not? That it was the 30-day, and then within that 30-day, if there's a viable option, then that demolition can be stopped.
But it doesn't preclude him applying to DEP?
Correct, correct.
Okay, I think we're clear on that. Mrs. Frank, on the motion to amend.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo? Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you.
Can I have one question I have, just so I'm clear?
Yeah.
30 days from this date, okay, 30 days from now, if nothing occurs, Mr. Logue gets hold of me and says, sorry, nothing happened, I can issue a double permit in 30 days. That's what I'm asking, because that's how it sounds to me what's going on.
My
If it's
understanding, Mr.
approved.
Droide, is that you can issue a demolition permit tomorrow. The way, if
Well, okay,
if
yes,
it's
but I'm saying
approved.
30, I won't issue it until the 30 days are up. I'm going to hold it because that's what you decided to do. My question is, after 30 days, I'm assuming if nothing happens, I issue a demo permit, Mr. Logan, go and start demoing that next day, correct?
I guess what I'm saying is whatever information Mr. Logue would need to apply to the DEP for for his right to demolish the structure, you would be able to give him as of tomorrow. So if he were to need a demolition permit from the city of Williamsport to apply to the DEP, then you could issue that instantaneously if the demolition is approved. And if he, then you can hold it for 30 days. If he doesn't need it until 30 days out, that's fine. But, you
I
are
just
you are
wanted to
free to do
verify.
as you will.
No, I just wanted to verify. I typically like to hold the permit until those times up, then I'll issue the permit. Mr. Logue doesn't need my permit. He basically, the information he gets, he usually submits to me, and I have it for my record. I just want to make sure, I prefer not to issue the permit until the 30 days are up.
So we're agreed the 30-day clock starts ticking.
Okay.
All right, back to the original demolition item, and any more discussion on that? I guess not. Mrs. Frank, on item 15, please.
Ms. Mealy?
No.
Mr. Nubiallo? No. Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
No.
Mr. Slaughter?
No.
Mr. Allison?
No. Thank you, Mrs. Frank.
What just happened? I don't understand what just happened.
We denied the demolition even with the condition.
But wasn't there 2 votes? I could be wrong, I missed it.
We voted on the amendment.
On the amendment, okay, thank you, I'm sorry, I was just,
And then we just voted on the
Gotcha.
item. So we did have the 2 votes.
okay.
Those were some good conditions, though, Mr. Henderson.
You guys got that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we need clarification, I'm not sure. You might want to ask the attorney. We good?
Yes. You voted yes on the amendment and no on the demolition.
Right.
That was my understanding of what happened. If anybody feels that it happened in error, then we can take another vote.
It was 5 to
Okay.
1,
Okay.
no on the demolition.
All right, guys, I'll get to work, I swear to God.
All right.
You're not getting any sleep.
No, I don't get any sleep already.
Mama Bear is on the roll.
Okay. We'll do the certificates of appropriateness. We'll just do those now as well.
Okay.
Item 16, certificate of appropriateness, 6 West 4th Street.
Yes. What you have before you is a certificate of appropriateness request for erect a business identification sign. I have attached a photo for the look, size, and color. The sign meets all the zoning requirements. The Planning Commission did review this on Monday, March 14th, and recommended approval to City Council. And at this point, I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions.
Are we all questioned out? Is there a motion on this?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Signage for new tenant? That's very nice. Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, just that it's really nice to see those storefronts filling in there. It's excellent.
What's that again?
I said it's been really nice to see those storefronts filling in down there. We're looking forward to extending the Central Business District into the other side of Market Street.
This sign is up, so everybody's aware
Yeah.
of. These two signs are up. They are aware, if I allow them to put them up, that there could be a possibility of the change from city council. But when you're a small business person in a small spot, it's hard for me to say, don't put your sign up for 3 weeks to advertise the business. So as long as they're aware of it, I do permit them to put it up. They do take a permit out for it. I don't charge them double, but if you see it, it's because they decided to put it up. It was me allowing them to put them up, with the condition they could change.
Joe, is that encasement, has that always been there?
Yes.
Okay, so there's really nothing other than the signage itself?
Yep. The signage, actually, no, that's a brand new, Mr. Musto actually rented out all his facilities, 3 little businesses. It's a brand new business, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, no, I'm just the encasement where the signage is presently that I see.
Yeah, that's all exactly the same. All they did was put the sign in that window.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Item 17, certificate of appropriateness for 47 West 4th Street. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Mr. Girardi.
Again, we have a business identification sign. I have attached a photo for the look, size, and color. This does meet all the sign requirements under the zoning ordinance. This sign is actually placed, you see it's 8 inches by 18 feet, smaller than the one that was originally there. That was Ozzie and Mays, who had something across there. Now Ozzie and Mays is located across the street. This went into the half of what the former Ozzie and Mays is.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Questions, council? Mrs. Katz.
This is on the side where the bar was? Or
Yes, where you
not
remember the bar
restaurant?
that had the counter they put in
Right.
that used, yes, it's
Right.
on that end. And
It's
they
on
still
that.
have, they still have the ability to put a restaurant if they want in the other end, because the kitchen and everything's still in that location.
What is this about?
It's a professional service that they provide. I'd have to look, Gary. That's what I thought, home health care. Yep.
Okay,
People come in to talk to them, and they set up for their parents with someone to go in and
Okay.
do some work for them.
okay, thank you.
No other questions, Mrs. Katz on the motion, please? Mrs. Frank.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. Then item
Thank you.
18, certificate of appropriateness, 416 West 3rd. Mr. Nar, is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second. Is there?
Second, sorry.
Thanks.
Good evening, Vice President, members of council. What I present to you tonight is a certificate of appropriateness located at 416 West 3rd Street at Farrington Place. This is outside the CBD, so it does not need a design review. However, because the awning will sit within the public right-of-way, does require a liability agreement. This liability agreement that you do have a copy of was reviewed by our solicitor, Norm Lubin, and he made positive that it was a good-to-go agreement. And at this point, I do have a representative here and can answer any questions.
Council, Ms. Mealy.
Actually, my only question is, and perhaps I simply missed something, is Farrington Place in the historic district? I'm actually not quite certain where it ends on that side.
It is not, it's in the CC, it crosses.
Okay,
over.
all right, got it,
It is
yeah.
outside there, yes.
Okay, all right, so we don't need to worry about that.
Correct.
This is the only, okay, good. That's everything, thank you.
Mrs. Katz.
That really is a narrow sidewalk where that is at this point, isn't it, if I remember correctly? It's not that wide of a sidewalk, or am I thinking of a different
It's
position
your,
where
it's
Farrington
a
Place?
standard size
It's a stand-
sidewalk.
Okay, so.
Actually, it's probably over 8 feet probably. Correct.
Right.
Okay.
And the awning
When I
does,
was there, it was narrow.
from the building itself, it extends out 5 feet, but it is 8 feet above the sidewalk.
Okay.
And it
Okay.
is compliant. They'll have to meet all the other zoning requirements and building code requirements for installation.
You know, the other thing I want to question with Farrington Place, this is a banquet hall. There's no qualification for parking or anything, is there?
They actually went before the zoning hearing board and got granted additional parking.
And where's the additional parking going to be?
Well, actually, what it was is they got a variance for 200 parking stalls.
Where do they find 200 parking?
They didn't. What happens is they made the exception. Basically, what happened was we had initially denied them a certificate of occupancy because they did not have parking. They appealed to through a variance to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board granted them that exception, not meeting the 200 and some parking stalls. And it was not appealed within 30 days, so therefore they did have a variance that was approved.
200 non-existent parking places.
Correct. The exception.
That does not make sense.
It was what it is it was an exception. They were required to have over 300 parking stalls. They had a certain amount of parking stalls, but they were lacking 263 parking stalls. Therefore, the zoning hearing board looked at it and granted them that exception to not meeting the extra parking that was necessary.
Okay.
Great.
Mr. Novale?
Does that interfere with like, something like our parking authority and police department's ticketing capacities?
It has
I mean,
nothing.
where are we going to put 200 cars if there's an exception for them? And they
Again,
have
if someone
three.
was parked illegally, then at that point, the police department would actually be able to issue a citation as well as a parking authority.
I'm thinking we're looking at 200 violations here potentially, you know? I'm just kind of
This is probably about 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. One other thought, just as I have the microphone, if you don't mind. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong because it's been some time. Wasn't there something with regard to parking issues with their delivery vehicles and such early on in their, that was resolved?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay, so okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I believe we have a representative here. If you'd like to speak, could you go up to the podium, please? And give your name and address.
Hello, good evening. My voice is a little hoarse from about 8 days of being ill, so I apologize if I'm clearing my throat a lot. Eric Winters, our address is 416 through 428 West 3rd Street. It's one of the 5 buildings we own on that street. And yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Joe and Gary. We've been in business over 5 years. That variance was over 3 years ago, so I am scratching my head a little bit wondering why it's being brought up. But we own 5 other properties that have dedicated parking, and we rent a parking lot as well, not to mention all the public free parking on the street, both sides of the street, the entire block, as well as city parking that's located within 500 feet. But like I said, I'm not sure exactly how that applies to this, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about what happened 3 or 5 years ago, as well, of course, about any of this. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Katz?
It came up because this was brought to us, okay? If something came up 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it's something that we wouldn't have remembered. And if 200 parking spaces came up to our attention, I think we would have questioned that then. That's the only reason.
Okay.
What you're doing with your business is terrific, that's fine, but we do have a right to question.
Oh, no, I
what's
definitely
going
am
on.
not upset. Please don't take the hoarse voice as any negative undertone. I was just curious, only because I had came prepared for the awning, not for what we had went through 3 years ago with the whole board, and it was like an hour hearing and months of prep and all that. So I didn't bring any of that stuff with me at all, because to be frank, I thought it was gone. So again, I don't mean any undertone. I didn't bring any of that information. I didn't realize it was.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy, did you know?
No, actually, I had a point a minute ago, but it doesn't, the discussion kind of got
Okay.
beyond it, so it's not, so.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Okay, we'll move back up in the agenda to item 6. And Mrs. Frank.
Resolution certifying the local match for state operating financial assistance.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Nichols. Welcome.
Good evening, Vice President Allison, members of council. The first two resolutions in front of you are companion documents as required by PennDOT for inclusion in our annual state operating financial assistance grant application for the next fiscal year, starting July 1. And as determined by formula in Act 89, Section 1513, RVT receives an amount of formula funds. In this case, it'll be $4,348,063 in operating funds, and it requires a local share of $386,580. So this resolution certifies that the local share will be secured. The second resolution then certifies to the source of the local funds that will be provided during the fiscal year. And as in the case of the past few years, for simplicity's sakes, the city will provide the local share, and then our transit partners will reimburse the city for their respective share. The Finance Committee did review this on Tuesday, so we're asking for your consideration, favorable consideration on these first two resolutions.
Yes, we did. Our finance chairman has momentarily left her seat to attend to something else. But we did review this in finance, and this is what we call
Standard.
Yes, standard, a standard resolution that we pretty much handle every year, and whenever these things come up. We talked about the funding match and where that's coming from. Would you address that, Mr.
Yes, we, right now, I think we have about 20 partners that fund the local share, approximately 70% of local share. By formula, it comes from the city. The other 30% is from various local sources, municipalities, businesses, other organizations, what have you. Question was raised about the Lycoming Mall, which certain shopping centers do provide a percentage of our local share. So we had a little discussion on the Lycoming Mall, and there's obviously concern there going forward as to if they're going to be a reliable local funding partner. So that's, and I had indicated that I'm reaching out to that. I think a new owner, just to try to assess just what is going on there, and when I get sort of a clear answer, I'll report back.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any comments or questions from council on this? If not, Mrs. Frank on this first resolution.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. And then we have the second part that matches that. Item 7, resolution by municipalities certifying the provision of the local match. Mrs. Frank.
Resolution by municipality certifying provision of local match for state operating financial assistance.
Thank you. Is there a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Nichols?
Again, this is the companion resolution that certifies where the local share is being provided, with the caveat that the city will be reimbursed by the various partners that we have that supply the local share.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mealy, you reviewed this in finance.
This is a standard resolution.
That's a standard introduction to it.
Right. The Finance Committee did indeed review this resolution and forward it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. This is, once again, something that we go through every year. And aside from the mall discussion and some discussion on the fact that Mrs. Katz has unwittingly been signed up for the MyStop mobile app, and some of the rest of us would like to be. There's nothing interesting to report.
I did forget to add that we've not had to raise the local share for any of our partners for well over 20 years, because when the local share does increase by formula, that we're able to secure new partners that offset any kind of increase to our grandfather partner, so to speak. So once again, we're not increasing the local share for the next fiscal year.
Okay. Mr. Henderson?
When these 20 partners reimburse the city, do they reimburse the city directly, or do they reimburse River Valley?
No, RVT, as per agreement, we bill them twice a year, provide them one budgeting period is for the actual year budget, but twice a year we do budget for half of the local share. So that money, those dollars are received by RVT, and the city bills us for that 30%. So the city doesn't have to worry about sending out a lot of different bills to different places. We handle all that.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. Item 8 then, resolution on consolidated capital grant application. Is there a
Resolution, Consolidated Capital Grant Application, CCA, resolution to file application and to certify local match.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion and second. Thank you. Mr. Nichols?
Thank you. For the first time in many years, we're not really submitting for a grant for buses. We are well in advance of keeping our fleet up to date because of our conversion to CNG. So this year we're requesting $4.9 million in state funding for various routine projects, but a couple of construction projects. One is a resubmission for something that we talked about and presented last year, a walkway connection between Trade and Transit 1 and 2 to the Third Street parking garage. All three facilities were designed for that connection, so we're resubmitting. And again, this was envisioned to be the last part of the downtown project, but also complement the Pine Street, East Third Street Gateway projects. The second project is for renovations and upgrades to the Trade and Transit 1 facility, which is now 20 years old, and our office and garage facility related to some storage improvements that the state wants us to do. So those have been submitted, and we need to have this resolution to go in with that application. And some ongoing capital projects like computer upgrades and related to PennDOT software initiatives and upgrades to our vehicle video system equipment. Many of these are required by PennDOT, so we submit them through this now grant process. There's still some, I don't know, we didn't really talk about it that much, but there's an ongoing issue that's still being looked at. There was a class action suit filed against the Turnpike Commission for some time through Act 44. Capital funds were provided through the Turnpike Commission to PennDOT to fund capital projects either by formula or by discretionary means for all the transit systems in the Commonwealth. A lion's share went obviously to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, with a small part funding the rest of the transit systems in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of unknown factors going forward about that revenue source for capital projects, and so it's of some concern, obviously, to our State Transit Association and others, but I don't know if you've read about it in the paper. That hasn't really been a high-profile type of situation, but it is a concern in terms of funding capital projects for the various transit systems in the Commonwealth. So, you know, if there's something that, and I know some projects have been put on hold, and I just don't know what the impact will be in terms of our request, but it is a concern. I just wanted to bring that up.
Interesting. Thank you. Comments or questions from council? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes?
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. I'm going to move to item 10. I apologize to Dr. Tracty. I should have gone to that first in this list, but better late than never. Mrs. Frank, would you read item 10, please?
Resolution of the City of Williamsport authorizing the submission of an application for funding to the Commonwealth Pennsylvania for Redevelopment Assistance Capital Grant in the amount of $2 million for the Lycoming College Gateway Project.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
Thank you. This resolution authorizes the City of Williamsport to, on behalf of Lycoming College, to submit the necessary paperwork for a $2 million RACB grant. And this would be a pass-through to Lycoming College for its Gateway project. The details of this pass-through grant are detailed in the cooperative agreement, which we attach to the resolution. This RACB grant is an integral part of the overall funding strategy for the Old City East 3rd Street Gateway Revitalization Project, and this will provide funds for site work, demolition, excavations, stormwater management, infrastructure improvements, utility relocation, parking lots, sidewalks, site lighting, and other amenities in relation to the college's part of the Gateway project. As you noted, Dr. Tracty, President of Lycoming College, is here tonight, and as you know, the college is and has been a tremendous partner, stakeholder in the overall project, and recently announced that a key component of the project is ready to advance, so we're very excited about that. The city, you know, and the college are married to this project in terms of the city will be advancing the Franklin and Basin Street improvements and 3rd Street in cooperation with PennDOT, and the college then is proceeding with its Gateway project, which is a really tremendous asset to the college and the city as a new gateway to the college. And so we're very excited that we've been able to put together a funding strategy, including this RACB grant, that is about, you know, all said and done, I think, with the college improvements, well over $20 million, and was certainly will revitalize a big part of the East End, east of Market Street. So Dr. Tracty is here if you have any questions, you know, about, I know he's very excited about that announcement, and I'm sure he is just dying to tell you all about it if you're interested. So.
We're very interested. Dr. Tracty, would you care to address this issue?
Mr. Vice President, members of council, I'm delighted to be here tonight. I heard Bill say something about being married, and I feel as though I'm been attached to him at the hip for about the last 3 years as we've tried to advance this project. I just really want to share a couple of words of gratitude and reflection. It was probably somewhere over 3 years ago that the city appointed an East 3rd Street Gateway Commission, and I was honored to be able to serve on that commission with a number of other members of our community, including Ms. Mealy, I believe you were on there, and we had County Commissioner Massari on there, and Bill and myself. And at that point in time, we went to work on trying to develop a vision for how the college might be able to collaborate with the city, with private developers, with the county, and ultimately with PennDOT to revitalize a long-neglected section of the city on the east side of Market Street. And we came to you with a plan, which you enthusiastically endorsed, but it was just words on a paper with some diagrams at that point in time, and then identified some potential sites for development. And the first priority site that was identified was the Basin Street corridor for a potential new gateway or entrance to the college. And so at that point in time, we went to work at the college, and we've been working over the last couple of years very diligently to develop a design for the building, to raise the capital needed to construct the building. As you've seen in the newspapers, it'll be about a $12.5 million project to construct the building, which will be a gorgeous new entry to the campus. But I think what I really want to say is what's really motivated me and the college to pursue this is not just the idea of building a building on our campus. I was not nearly as excited when we constructed the Lynn Science Center during my first year in office as I am by this, because this project is part of a larger vision. And it's part of a vision for how all of us can work together to really create an exciting venue, an exciting part of the city that will hopefully be frequented by people not only from Williamsport and Lycoming County, but from beyond Williamsport and Lycoming County. And we're very excited that this really represents the first tangible step to begin the work on this project. So I want to express my gratitude to council for the support and encouragement that you provided to the city administration as well. And I want you to know that both the county commissioners and the county planning department, and most recently PennDOT, have also been collaborating very closely with us. So I think it's time to roll up our sleeves and bring in some construction equipment and begin to transform this part of our city. And I hope that you will agree to accept this grant on our behalf so we can get started. I'm glad to answer any questions.
It was reviewed by finance. Would you?
Finance says first and foremost, woot woot. We're very happy to see this resolution, this grant come through for the college. We've been equally excited to see the grant funding begin to roll in for other portions of the project, especially the grant that came in $100,000 over what we were expecting and what we'd asked for, which is always exciting. The Finance Committee did forward this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation, so set your mind at ease there, Dr. Trakti. We had a brief discussion. The college is obviously taking on all the reporting requirements, all of the paperwork elements of the grant, which is a huge relief to those of us who've seen some of our staff undergo those here in the city at other times. The college is also taking on the city whenever we receive a RACP grant. We open a line of credit, or we utilize a line of credit to revolve funding in and out because the grant is a reimbursement grant, and the funding can sometimes take, what, Mr. Nichols, a couple of years?
Hopefully only 60 days.
Okay. Anyway, depending on how things are going, sometimes you have to flex the money out for a period of time. The college is also taking on that responsibility, is my understanding, so there really will be no cost to the city. We are acting as a pass-through organization. The other discussions that the Finance Committee had in reviewing this particular item, the next steps for this project, we'll see a land development from the college for the new building, and we'll see an MOU with the college memorializing our understandings. And then I understand, and this was news I think at the Finance Committee, that instead of PennDOT has been moving back their paving date for the 3rd Street corridor for a number of years until I think it's now at 21, 22, something like that. We want to get this project moving. Due to discussions with PennDOT, they have agreed to effectively pay us to pave it ourselves, if that makes sense. They're not paying us extra, unfortunately, but they're going to pay the cost of paving 3rd Street so the city can make it a part of our paving plan in next year, I believe, correct, Mr. Nichols? Or are we trying to?
We'll be bringing a reimbursement agreement to council. Right now, it's in the hands of PennDOT reviewing our comments, and again, that would be a pass-through from PennDOT to us, so that we would let the project on PennDOT's behalf, so that would move it forward from when want to do the rest of Third Street. So they've been very cooperative to that end, and so it's been a great partnership. A couple other points, I think, the President alluded to, is the county recently stepped forward and provided a allotment, an allocation to this project equal to what the city borrowed for the project. So we were very pleased, excited about the county stepping forward, and this is turning out like we did with the west of Market Street projects, with the lead partners working together, not only in a collaborative way, but in a funding partnership way. So, that was exciting when that happened recently. And again, the Lycoming College very supportive when we went to the county to make that request. The last thing is, as you alluded to, the college is taking the responsibility for the administration of the grant. This is very similar to the last time the city was involved in something like this was with Hope Enterprise. We passed through a RACP grant of $2 million, and they took on the responsibility of the requirements of the RACP grant, which are somewhat cumbersome, but dealing with special conditions and a final application you have to submit, dealing with an engineering firm that the state provides as an oversight for whatever project you're dealing with. So college is geared up to do that, and we're geared up to support that, and as well as they're supporting us in what we have to do. So it's really working very well. So.
Other comments from council?
I could just add one comment. I just want to put on the record that we're also grateful to Senator Yaw for helping us with getting this RACP grant. We would not have been successful without his advocacy, and as Mr. Nichols suggested, there's about $5 million of $7 million in grants for infrastructure that are already committed, and both Representative Whelan and Senator Yaw have been helpful in advancing those as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't get that into the record. And we have retained firms that have experience in administering RACP grants. Firm Stantec that has worked with the health system, and then also Delta Development. So we're confident that we'll be able to navigate through all the landmines.
Literally. Yeah. Well, I think we're very pleased to hear that as well. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we're ideally happy because this, to council, I know, is, and the administration, I think, a prime example of how public-private partnership should work to facilitate development. And we're happy that we can do our part for the things that we do best that allows the college and hopefully a lot of others to develop down there and do the things that they do best. And I think at the end, we're all going to be very pleased with the product because the process is right. So thanks again for everything that you've done, Dr. Tracti. You're welcome.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the staff, city staff, for they are now very much engaged in this. Gary Narr sleeps very well at night thinking about this project. Chelsea and Joe Girardi and the staff has really been, very supportive. I mean, and John Grado coming back a day a week, and they're all stepping up to the plate to help with this project, and they're the experts now, in terms of making this all happen. So, thank you in advance and for all you've been doing. So I know it's difficult. These projects, there's so much complication when you have more than one entity involved. So
right. Well, we're moving ahead and breaking ground, so that's always a good thing. Mrs. Frank, then, on the motion.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank, and thank you, Mr. Nichols. We'll move back to item 9 then.
Resolution authorizing the execution of 2 construction contracts for the expansion of RVT's CNG fueling facility project.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Nichols.
Thank you again. We were very fortunate that, again, given my comments previous about, complications with capital funding, CNG is a priority for the state. We were the first system to commit to a CNG conversion, and we're only the second system in the state that's gone through the conversion. State College is doing it 20 years ago. They really were the leaders. But they did give us a green light to go ahead with this part of the project, and this was to award a contract to Beavers Petroleum Equipment for the purchase and installation of additional equipment for our fueling station. This will be, what they're doing is they're adding a third compressor to our station, as well as some additional storage tubes. If you recall, when we awarded this, historically speaking, back, this project started in 2013, 5 years ago, when we did the first part of the station, and we put 2 compressors in, and back then we stated that the state wanted to wait and didn't want to fund the third compressor until we got about 75% of the way in terms of our conversion, and we're there. 75% of our fleet is now CNG, which is pretty remarkable in a 5-year span of time. The other contract is the Glen Ohio Baker for some paving work. So again, the design team was provided by the state. They funded that in its entirety, as well as the needed construction management services. They're funding this grant 100%, again, because of the Secretary of Transportation's commitment to this project. And so this will complete our fueling station, after 5 years. And that's the only thing left to really do at this point in time is add some additional storage for vehicles, CNG vehicles, but, we're pretty well almost to the end of the road in terms of our conversion, so we're very pleased to be able to present this and get the green light from PennDOT to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. This was reviewed in finance as well.
And Finance forwards it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation, pending the answer to one question, Mr. Nichols, which was
Oh, yeah, that was a good question, because I found out the answer.
Okay, let's hear it.
And it was a positive answer.
All right.
We did get approved $700,000, so yes, we do have
Couple $100 grand.
a heads up on investment in our storage we wanted to do. So there is, we budgeted and have approved $700,000 for additional CNG projects.
Got it.
Related projects, and since this came in well underneath what the state expected, we do have $200,000 set aside from additional projects.
Can't we get like a CNG station downtown or something?
Well, first of all, I was very surprised that we were well under the budget.
Yeah. Well, I kept looking back and forth and thinking something must be wrong.
I know. No, that was an excellent question, because you were exactly right.
So that's good. So that's twice this month when we've gotten too
It
much
happened
money.
very often that we
Yeah, I
have
know.
that
I
extra
think,
money.
I think something really bad must be coming, Mr. Nichols. Okay. So the $200,000 is being socked away for something, and
CNG related.
okay, fine. If we can find something somewhere around here, then let's by all means do it. Sounds good. Thank you. We forwarded it, as I said, with a positive recommendation.
Questions or comments from council? And with the price of gasoline going up, we're saving more money by the day.
Well, the commodity price for CNG has remained remarkably stable. And it's under $3 for whatever that unit is. $2, and I saw it today, $2.80. And to compare that to gas, you divide that number by 8, which is 38 cents, 30, whatever it is. So compared to diesel, not taxed, which is $2.20 now for us, and CNG is less than 40 cents equivalent gallon. Now you have other costs, compression, electricity, and things like that, but the savings are unbelievable at this point in time because of the cost of fuel. So
Added
that
benefits.
is pretty remarkable. As long as seeing the cost of that commodity stays well under $3, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's been as high as $14, but because of the excess supply, the Marcellus Shale, and addition of new pipelines, this has a bright future for us in terms of fuel.
good news. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. Then item 11, resolution to approve a sub-recipient grant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Resolution to approve a 2016 sub-recipient monitoring agreement between the County of Lycoming and the City of Williamsport.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second, thank you. And Stephanie Young is going to.
Good evening. This is a subrecipient agreement with Lycoming County for $225,000 of 2016 fair funds. These funds will be provided for repairs to rental and owner-occupied residential homes on the city's list of historic properties and sites. The city will give preference to units that are occupied by tenant or owner-occupied households with income below the Lycoming County 2016 50% area median income. The FAIR program does require that at least 30% of those households receive those funds. No FAIR funds may benefit households with incomes above 200% of the area median income, and any rental units must be affordable to lower-income households. Each applicant may apply for up to $25,000. Funds are at a 0% interest rate and have a 10-year forgiveness term, and a minimum 15% cash match from the property owner is required. We do plan to do a mass mailing to notify the residential property owners on the list about the program. Initially, we will not be including any residential properties that are in the historic district because we have budgeted 2018 CDBG funds specifically for rehab in the historic district. The city solicitor has reviewed this agreement, and this agreement was also reviewed by the Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mrs. Young. Finance did review it.
We just reviewed everything. Finance did review this and forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. We've known we had this funding for quite some time, and we are sort of acting on it, I suppose. The city is still, the Historic Preservation Committee, frankly, is working on a final list of historic structures within the city, but we do have one from 2005 that we're currently operating with, and the work I think ahead is simply to merge the 2005 list with the 2015 list generated by the county. Some properties from the 2005 list, of course, no longer exist. Some have been modified so heavily they're no longer considered historic. But all of that said, that list is the one that we'll be working with, and if and when we update the list, we'll start working with that, with the new one. This funding is exciting. There aren't a lot of times when it pays to have an older property in the city of Williamsport. So this is one time when we can provide some amount of funding for properties that are some of our more interesting historic properties and are in need of rehab. And they're probably all in need of rehab. So just for the record, 50% of the median income is $29,050. So some percentage of those funds must be spent for either tenants or homeowners who make under $30,000 a year for the household. And that is not able to be adjusted depending on the number of people in the household for reasons that are a little unclear, but some whimsy at the state level. And so those income limits are fixed. It's 200% of the median income is $116,000, and that's the absolute threshold for earning in any parcel that would receive funding from this program. That said, as I stated, Finance forwarded this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Questions or comments from council?
Actually, Randy, if I can make one more observation, not directly related to this, but we did have some discussions about other incentives that the city might have, shop steading loans and a few other programs that have funding in them, in part because interest rates have dropped so low nationally that they aren't much sought after with the interest rates that are set within the program guidelines. That said, I think all the members of finance were unaware that the city actually controls those interest rates and most of the requirements of the grant funding. So we had some discussions with Ms. Young and Mr. Nichols about sitting down and looking a little harder at the at the money that we have and trying to modify the guidelines so that it's appealing to area developers.
Yeah, and for instance, the fair funding is only for residential properties. However, the city has a commercial facade program. So we're going to look at that as well to see if that can be a program that could maybe be tweaked a little bit and more advantageous.
Other comments or questions? We're certainly grateful anytime that we can access a program that helps us upgrade our housing stock, and thank you for your diligence in doing this, Mrs. Young.
Sure, thank you.
Mrs. Frank, on the motion, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. And we'll go to item 12, resolution authorizing a petition for renewal of
A resolution authorizing the petition for renewal under the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board Liquor Code for noise regulation approved by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board on July 15th, 2015.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. This did not go to any council committees because there was a request from the administration due to time constraints that we would just put it on the agenda. It is a renewal of something we've passed we've approved in the past, so I thought it was appropriate we could ask any questions we have about it now. Mr. Nar.
Good evening again, Vice President, members of council. The resolution is a renewal request to PLCB in order to extend the noise waiver to allow amplified music outside a Pennsylvania liquor license establishment. The waiver actually expires July 15, 2018. The city still maintains 3 different zones in this resolution that authorizes extension request by PLCB. Providing council approves this resolution, PLCB will again hold 3 sets of 3 hearings, 1 here in City Hall area, 1 in each zoned area. At that point in time, they will make a determination if we can basically get another extension of that. If they do, they will provide us with the length of time to do that. Initially, they did a 1 year, then we requested a renewal, they did a 2 year, so hopefully this year they make it a little bit more lengthy so we don't have to keep coming back for this, in order to have the entertainment ordinance in effect. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Questions or comments from council? Mr.
Gary, I
Noviello.
don't know if you can answer or not, but have we had much in the way of complaints or responses from the city administration regarding?
We
this
haven't had
ordinance?
any complaints in any of the zones.
Okay, so this then should, in your thought, should go through pretty readily?
It should be.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Great.
Any other comments or questions? When this initially came up, we had a very long, protracted investigation and research into it and discussion, so it's good to hear that it's just flowing like it was designed to do.
Thank you.
On the motion then, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Nar. And thank you, Mrs. Frank. Item 13, resolution real estate refund.
Resolution real estate refund, and this one is for 163 Catawissa Avenue.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Grimes.
Good evening, Vice President and members of council. This is for a refund for a property located at 163 Catawissa Avenue. A few meetings ago, you guys approved a reduction in real estate for this specific property. That application was first put into the county for the assessment change in 2016, which would become effective in 2017. That application was denied by the county. After it was denied, it went through the court process. Settlement agreement happened, and the new assessed values didn't come until 2018. Since the original application was in 2016, it would be effective for 2017, and the owner has requested the refund for those overpaid taxes for 2017. And you can see the attached worksheet for the overpayment, and the refund would be $9,983.40 for this property.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Questions or comments from council? Mr. Noviello?
Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but we've had a number of these types of reductions for this particular property owner. Can you tell me why, over this course of time, we've had so many reductions? And can you give our viewing audience an indication of what causes the reduction to begin with?
I think the main argument in this specific scenario is the warehousing in the city of Williamsport. The values, the business value is down, which causes the real estate value to be down. So this was challenged, saying that the assessment of the property, the warehouse, was too high. And then that was challenged through the court, and the settlement agreement happened based on the owner thinking that his property was assessed higher than what it's worth.
Any other questions or comments from council? Mrs. Frank on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. And we have item 14, another real estate refund.
Real estate refund, and the property address is 2406 Reach Road.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Grimes?
Thank you. This is another warehouse, 2406 Reach Road, owned by Mr. Stopper, and same circumstance, same timelines. It was challenged at the same time, denied, went through the court process, settlement reached, and he's asking for a refund. And the refund for this specific property is $10,406.60.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Questions or comments on this one? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Frank. Then we go to item 19, certificate of appropriateness for Harb. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Items are 771 West 3rd Street, 1883-story brick Victorian Queen Anne style house, and they're doing a lot of repairs and replacements to it. Item 3, Ways Garden, and construct a 22 by 36 roofed rough oak timber pavilion with a composite deck. And I believe that's it. Questions or comments from council? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Then we have item 20. Except for filing Veterans Memorial Park Commission minutes of March 5th, 2018, public safety minutes, February 27th, 2018, controller report for March 31st, 2018, and finance committee minutes for February 27th, March 27th, and April 24th, all of 2018. Is there a motion?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Comments or questions from council? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be on a Thursday, for a change, June 7th, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. right here in City Hall Council Chambers. Upcoming meetings are Monday, May 28th, closed, no meeting that day. Tuesday, May 29th, at 12 noon, the Planning Commission, 3:30 p.m. ERC, 7 p.m. Citizens Corps. Thursday, May 31st, 4:30 p.m. Pension Board Review. Monday, June 4th, 5:30 p.m. Government Study Home Rule. Tuesday, June 5th, 11 a.m. Historic Preservation Committee, 1 p.m. Finance Committee, 2:30 p.m. Public Works, 3:30 p.m. Public Safety. Wednesday, June 6th, 4 a.m. Oh, boy. You're going to miss that one. 4 p.m. it is. Charter Commission. And Thursday, June 7th, 7:30 p.m. is our council meeting. all these meetings are in council chambers. Then we'll have comments from the public. Anybody want to say anything? No, no comments from the public tonight. Then we'll have comments from council. There's been expressed from, pardon me?
Adam, are we still picking up brush? Okay.
Thank you, Adam. I was wondering.
Were those personal thank yous there?
For the next month or so, right?
That's good. And it just goes to show, council members do not take advantage of, demand extra privileges. A couple things council members have expressed an interest in publicly commenting on tonight. One is the water and the authorities' issues that have been in the press and very public. And the other is the hiring of a new engineer. And so if I might just kick it off, the first subject with the authorities. I think there's been things in the newspaper, but the reason we feel a need to make some kind of statement is because there's been a lot more publicized in social media, Facebook, and other methods of getting out press releases or rough drafts of press releases that get disseminated, and the public has a lot of questions, and there haven't been a lot of answers. They've kind of come piecemeal, and then they read things in the newspaper that are said or proposed. And I just have a couple of brief things to say, and other council members can comment on that. But I believe, at least for me, and I know for each one of us, some of the core issues are we've always wanted to protect the assets of the authorities from sale or lease, to extract more money than is from the authority in a way that legally they can't give us more money. They can't contribute to our budget each year. But we haven't wanted to try other avenues because we've also been cognizant of the need to protect the ratepayers. And any money taken from the authority beyond what they normally raise would have to come from ratepayers in the end. So those are two areas. And the other thing we don't want to put at risk is our relationship and cooperation with neighboring municipalities, who that kind of activity would affect as well, and affect them negatively, and affect our relationships with them negatively. And we're working together on a lot of important issues, like the levy and MS4, Graphius Run. That's not just a Williamsport issue. We're working with our neighbors on that, and we need a cooperative effort, and we don't want to put that at risk by going for the dollars in that way. So having said that, that's all I have to say about it. Is there anyone else who'd care to? Mr. Henderson.
I just have a few comments, I guess. I have a statement I'd like to read. As I see it, the administration has lost sight of the fact that government elected officials are only stewards of the people's resources. That's money, property, water. Unfortunately, there's been no communication with council or the people prior to and concerning the recent hiring of an engineer, or concerning future plans with the Water Authority. And In light of the rushed meeting to elect new chairman on May 16th and a possible sunshine law violations on the 23rd, it seems obvious that no attempt is being made to discover the will of the taxpayers of Williamsport before rash and highly consequential decisions are being made. Recent resignations at the Water Authority, the fact that 3 board members are leading decisions while on expired terms, the chairman being both displaced and replaced in the last 6 months, and the fact that the authority is running with administrative vacancies suggest that there is great instability there. That being the case, this is no time to make decisions that would disregard most of the work done the past 2 years concerning the Stormwater Authority. It must be stated that while such actions may technically be legal, although that remains to be thoroughly investigated, they are certainly not right. And while the mayor does have certain authority, I feel that his unilateral actions and evading of accountability will have costly repercussions for the people whose resources he is to manage. If this is what I see, and supposedly as a councilman I have the inside scoop, then what must the people think? And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Henderson, others? Mr. Noviello?
I agree with that 100%. I also feel that there's been a fair degree of disrespect and lack of consideration to advance Mr. Henderson's thoughts regarding the work that's been done over the last several years by both Public Works Committee and the Finance Committee. Hours upon hours of work and special meetings and meetings outside the normal schedule of meetings that we generally approve of. This has compounded to the extent that I think the citizenship needs more informative answers on a more routine kind of a basis, particularly before such decisions are made. I would put the term resignations that you mentioned in parentheses.
Yes.
Quite frankly, as well. With respect to the hiring of a new engineer, certainly I have no aspersions to cast upon the person who was named. However, as I understand it, and again, I've always predicate my comments with someone is free to correct me. As I understand it, this person does not have the qualifications necessary for the position that we are seeking to fulfill. There's a PE that's required. I don't believe that this person has that in hand. I would like to see someone having that credential in hand, considering the types of projects that the city's facing over the next several years. They are demanding projects. Certainly we want to have that qualification and that certification that we're looking for when it comes to the end game with all these projects. I'm again hoping that we can find a bit of a better resolution than we've seen up to this particular point in time. Certainly some communication with leadership would be greatly appreciated. And frankly, I think by way of the public, that kind of communication is expected and anticipated. And I'm having a difficult time responding to the questions and the commentaries that I'm hearing from a number of individuals who have been keeping an eye on what has been made at least available to them by way of the public discussions that we have had and what information the paper prints and, as you mentioned, what goes on social media. I always put a little bit of a caveat with social media, only to the extent that it isn't often as informed as it might be. And I think that goes back to our original concerns here to a great extent. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President.
Who was first? Okay.
I have to reiterate what Don is saying. We have put so many years into working with the Water Authority with unfunded mandates, trying to come up with the solutions. We've had people working on these projects for so long, be it the Water Authority, be it here at City Hall, and people who have made contacts throughout the county, throughout the state. And to watch some of this get torn apart in a matter of weeks and not having the answers that we need to follow through, I don't think people understand. I mean, we have a lot on our plate right now that encompasses millions of dollars. And not to have an engineer that's qualified bothers us all tremendously. I mean, so much is put on Mr. Nichols' plate as far as taking up all these projects that are in the process. It's just, you know, bringing John Grado back, God love the man for coming back 1 week, you know, 1 day a week. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask everybody when you don't have the right person in that position. And this concerns us, not only because of the money that has to come through, but also because the projects. You don't want somebody coming in and making mistakes. And it's at this point, because we're all counting every penny that we can to come to the conclusions. And I think we're all frustrated because I don't think the public realizes that we're left out in the cold a lot. We don't have the answers. We are not given the answers. And it's just it's very bothersome. So we're questioning a lot. And it's interesting because this is my second term on the city council. And as I've stated, now people are asking more questions about so many different things. It's not like it was almost 6-7 years ago where, okay, this is the way things were done. We are all questioning a lot. And we're coming up with trying to find the correct answers, but we also want to have the right people in the positions to help us find those answers.
Thank you. Mr. Slaughter?
Well, I, of course, wasn't here the last few years, obviously. But just looking at it, starting since January, it has not made a lot of sense from what I have seen. I'm not going to repeat, obviously, everything that's already been said. I'm in 100% agreement with that. I would just hope moving forward that there'd be some rational process, judgment, and decision-making that can be backed up with some common sense justification for decisions that are made, both as members of council and the administration. So again, I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. I'm 100% in agreement, and hopefully moving forward, we have some type of reliable process that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ms. Mealy?
The members of the Finance Committee, myself, Mr. Allison, and Mrs. Katz, attended a special finance meeting related to issuing an insurance RFP a couple of weeks ago. And at the time, the mayor was present and used the phrase several times, open and transparent. And I found it ironic that day in particular, and I find it ironic and now as well, because there has been little that's been open and transparent and above board, I think, about what's been happening within the Water Authority and what's been happening to a certain extent with our hiring process at the city on this last hire. As everyone else has stated, I don't by any stretch question our engineering hire per se, but the process itself was deeply flawed. There was no process. And whether you're running your city as a business or you're running your city as a city, it wouldn't matter. As a business owner, I don't, even as a business owner in a relatively pick up and fly by the seat of your pants sort of business, I don't hire somebody off the street. I engage in a process. I request applications, and that is an important thing to do no matter what level you are operating at, but particularly at this level. Our process has to be unimpeachable, and I don't feel as though our process has been unimpeachable in any way, shape, or form. As regards the Water Authority, I look forward to speaking more about it in the next few weeks, without a doubt. But I am saddened, even as it stands, to when I attended with Mrs. Katz and Mr. Allison the Water Authority meeting on Wednesday afternoon, to see that not only were we present, but several members of the public were present, several past members of the Water Authority, and members of the managers of different boroughs who participate in our Water Authority were there. And that, unfortunately, did not speak to their sudden interest and excitement about what was happening at the Water Authority. It spoke to their nervousness about the mayor's proposals in the paper. And that, in turn, makes me nervous, because we are the stewards of a very remarkable resource that will only gain in value as we steward it. There are many parts of the country that are not fortunate to have water in the way that we do here. Mm-hmm. And we have spent decades building relationships throughout the valley, relationships that frankly I would love to see duplicated in other arenas of municipal business, but we have them in water and sewer, and to put those at risk for the idea of some sort of short-term financial gain would be exceptionally foolish and short-sighted. And I am open to discussions on any topic whatsoever, but I am not open to jeopardizing my children's water supply. So I look forward to discussing that with the administration further in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. And regarding that Water Authority meeting we attended on Wednesday, I think we were all encouraged by the tenor and the direction and the things that we heard there, and are supportive of the expression of the board members that they publicly stated they look at it the same way. No sale, no lease, and the ratepayers, they stressed more than once, were their main concern as well. You know, we want to move forward in that tenor, that tone, and that kind of cooperation. And I think that speaks in everything, to everything that we've addressed tonight. We're talking, we've said this many, many times, whether it's hiring or bringing forth a plan or investigating something or floating an idea, it's about the process. There's got to be a rational, logical, well-stated, well-thought-out process that can stand the light of day and can be transparent. That today, I think, almost universally in this country, is the citizens' problems with the various levels of government. Too many things are decided outside of the light of the public introspection, or any kind of contact with the public, and we don't want that in this city, and we don't want that with this city government and our part of it, and I think that's where we're coming from. So I think everybody's been able to hear the hearts and the minds of council tonight, and we're going to move forward and keep pushing that agenda, because that's the best for the city and the best for the citizens and the best for our neighbors that surround us and border us. So thank you, everybody, and job well done. Is there anything from the administration tonight? Okay. And nothing from the public, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Oh, I have to announce that we're going to have a brief executive session to discuss personnel and possibly a legal issue. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.